According to Secret Service, an armed man was shot and killed today at U.S. President Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida.
Donald Trump's life has been under serious threat lately. Early Sunday morning, Trump's private Palm Beach residence became the center of another alarming moment.
About a man shot and killed outside the president's Florida home early yesterday.
A man armed with a shotgun breached Mar-a-Lago's security perimeter and had to be shot by the police. Coming just months after the assassination of Charlie Kirk by another shooter, it's hard not to notice a disturbing pattern here. The shooter has been identified by the FBI as Austin Tucker Martin, and so far, everything emerging about Martin paints a confusing picture. He was just 21 years old, originally from North Carolina, and according to family members, he was quiet, soft-spoken, and deeply introverted. His cousin, Braden Fields, described him as someone who kept to himself and avoided conflict. He wasn't aggressive, he didn't like loud noises, and despite what authorities later said he was carrying, his family insists he had almost no experience with firearms. His cousin, who is an avid hunter, said Martin had been around guns many times growing up, but refused to use them. He apparently hated the sound and said they hurt his ears. The only weapon his cousin recalls him ever touching was a BB gun. Even then, he wasn't interested. Martin worked at a golf course, helping prepare it for the season. He loved golf courses in general, not just playing or working on them, but painting them too. Yes, painting. Martin's online presence was surprisingly small. For someone in his early 20s, there wasn't a deep trail of posts, arguments, or controversial content. In fact, there were no obvious red flags. No manifesto, no violent rhetoric, no extreme political messaging. Instead, he had an art website. He shared watercolor and ink artwork, mostly landscapes and scenic views of golf courses. His work focused on architecture, greenery, and peaceful outdoor settings. That pretty much sums up the tone of his art. He had basic accounts, Facebook, possibly Twitter, but nothing that stood out. No heavy online presence, no obvious radicalization trail. He was also religious. Some of his artwork included captions thanking God, complete with Christian emojis. Family members say faith was part of his daily life, though he didn't preach or push beliefs onto others. Another detail that stands out is that he regularly gave money to charity. According to his cousin, Martin would donate part of every paycheck. It wasn't for attention, he just did it quietly. Politically, his family says he showed very little interest. In fact, Fields stressed that Martin avoided political discussions altogether. The irony is that their family describes themselves as strong supporters of Donald Trump, but Martin himself rarely talked about politics and didn't engage in debates. However, co-workers later shared that Martin had grown frustrated with the state of the U.S. economy and felt powerless watching things unfold nationally. He had tried to start a workers' union at one point but was unsuccessful at it. He also expressed anger over the government cover-up involving the Epstein files. He texted a co-worker that evil is real and urged others to raise awareness. Despite that, those closest to him say he wasn't radicalized or obsessed with political movements. There's also family tragedy in the background. Martin had two brothers and a sister. The sister died in a car accident 2 years ago at age 21. Now, the family is facing the loss of another child. One brother is reportedly serving in the U.S. Army. Another key detail involves the weapon. Authorities confirmed he carried a shotgun, not a rifle. Experts noted that distinction matters. A shotgun is typically associated with close-range use, not long-distance targeting. It's not the kind of weapon used for sniping from afar. His entry into Mar-a-Lago suggests careful planning. Mar-a-Lago is Trump's $420 million residence that's also at the core of his fraud trial. It sits in Palm Beach, Florida, and it's protected around the clock by the United States Secret Service. It's surrounded by fencing, monitored entrances, surveillance cameras, and armed patrols. Even when Trump isn't physically there, the estate stays under federal protection because of its political significance. Yet somehow, in the middle of the night, a man in his early 20s made it inside. According to law enforcement, Martin entered through the north gate, slipping in as another vehicle was exiting. That brief opening was all it took. Secret Service agents spotted him almost immediately. It was clear that this wasn't a confused trespasser. The man was carrying a shotgun. On the other hand, he had a gasoline container. Agents ordered him to stop and drop what he was holding. He set the gas can down. Then he raised the shotgun. That's when everything changed. Officers opened fire, and he was pronounced dead at the scene. Authorities later confirmed that no Secret Service agents or Palm Beach County deputies were injured, and no protected individuals were on the property at the time. One important detail came out shortly afterward. Trump wasn't even in Florida. He was in Washington, D.C. after attending a National Governors Association dinner and staying overnight at the White House. So while the incident happened at his residence, he was nowhere near Mar-a-Lago when it unfolded. But the timing makes this feel even heavier. Just a few months ago, Charlie Kirk was fatally shot at a speaking event in Utah. Not long before that, in 2024, Trump survived an assassination attempt when a bullet grazed his ear. Within minutes, Trump's property was locked down. Evidence markers went up near the gate. Agents began pulling surveillance footage. Nearby residents were asked to check doorbell cameras. Federal officials confirmed that the FBI would take over the investigation. Now this brings us to the big question: should he have been shot? Once Austin Tucker Martin was inside the perimeter, there was very little time for negotiation. Secret Service agents and a Palm Beach County Sheriff's deputy moved toward him almost immediately after detecting the breach. Body camera footage and surveillance video are now being reviewed frame by frame, but officials have already outlined the basic sequence of events. Martin was ordered to stop. He was told to drop what he was carrying. At first, he complied partially. He set the gas can down on the ground. But then, according to authorities, he raised the shotgun into what officers described as a firing position. That action changed everything. In situations like this, agents are trained to respond based on immediate threat perception, and a raised firearm at close range meets the legal threshold for deadly force. Both Secret Service agents and the sheriff's deputy discharged their weapons. Martin was struck and pronounced dead at the scene. No law enforcement personnel were injured, and there were no civilians nearby at the time of the encounter. Within hours, officials confirmed that the agents involved were placed on routine administrative leave, a standard procedure following any officer-involved shooting. The FBI is now leading the investigation into the use of force, working alongside the Secret Service and Palm Beach County authorities. This includes reviewing body camera footage, radio communications, forensic evidence, and witness statements. Former federal security officials have described the suspect's behavior as consistent with a rapidly escalating threat. By raising the weapon after being ordered to drop it, Martin left officers with only seconds to react. Officials also emphasized that there was no prolonged standoff. The confrontation unfolded very quickly. For now, authorities maintain that the response was justified based on the suspect's actions. They've also learned that his own family had already reported him missing. Here's the part that changes everything. Martin hadn't simply shown up in Florida out of nowhere. His family had already reported him missing days earlier. Police in Moore County confirmed that relatives contacted authorities after they couldn't reach him and became worried about where he'd gone. By the time Martin entered Mar-a-Lago early Sunday morning, he had already driven roughly 600 miles south. That alone tells you this wasn't accidental. After the shooting, law enforcement searched his vehicle. Inside, they found the box for the shotgun. Investigators now believe the firearm was either recently purchased or transported in its original packaging. Agents are tracing the serial number to determine exactly where and when it was obtained. Right now, that's a major focus of the case. So is Martin's travel timeline. The FBI is reconstructing his movements from North Carolina to Palm Beach, pulling toll booth records, license plate reader data, traffic cameras, and cell phone location information. They're also reviewing his financial activity to see when gas stops were made, where purchases occurred, and whether anything stands out along the route. At the same time, agents are digging into Martin's digital footprint. That includes social media accounts, search history, messages, and emails, looking for signs of planning, fixation on Trump, political extremism, or mental health distress. So far, officials haven't released any confirmed motive, and they've been careful not to speculate. They've also said there's no evidence right now that Martin had accomplices. Family members are being interviewed. Friends and acquaintances are being contacted. Investigators are trying to understand what Martin's mindset was in the days leading up to February 22, and whether anyone noticed warning signs. Authorities have also confirmed that Martin did not have a known violent criminal history, which raises even more questions. Because this wasn't a spontaneous stumble onto private property. This was a young man who crossed multiple state lines, arrived in Palm Beach in the middle of the night, approached a heavily guarded estate, and brought both a shotgun and gasoline with him. Investigators are now trying to determine whether he scoped out Mar-a-Lago beforehand or simply arrived and acted. Either way, his family's missing person report has become a critical piece of the timeline, showing that concern started days before the confrontation ever happened. Entering Mar-a-Lago without being caught is no small feat. This isn't just a house. It's a massive oceanfront compound in Palm Beach owned by Trump, and it's often called one of the most exclusive private clubs in the country. The property spans about 20 acres and includes a 126-room mansion, private beach access, grand ballrooms, guest suites, and carefully manicured gardens that sit between the Atlantic Ocean and Lake Worth. Membership reportedly runs around $700,000 just to get in, with annual fees near $14,000. The estate itself has been valued as high as $350 million. Inside, you'll find gold accent accents, crystal chandeliers, and historic 1920s architecture originally commissioned by Marjorie Merriweather Post. Today, it's both a luxury club and Trump's personal retreat. It frequently hosts political fundraisers, foreign leaders, and high-profile donors, which is exactly why any incident there immediately becomes national news. But at the exact moment this incident was happening in Mar-a-Lago, Trump was already hundreds of miles away. He was in Washington, D.C. He had spent Saturday evening attending a National Governors Association dinner and stayed overnight at the White House. Officials later made it clear that no protectees were present at Mar-a-Lago during the incident. That detail matters. Even when Trump isn't physically there, the estate remains under continuous federal protection because of its status and history. Once the suspect was neutralized, Trump was briefed almost immediately by federal officials. White House sources said he was kept informed as details emerged throughout the early morning hours. Publicly, Trump didn't release a statement right away, and he hasn't done it so far. His social media posts later that morning focused on unrelated events, while law enforcement continued processing the scene in Florida. Back at Mar-a-Lago, the North Gate was sealed off. Evidence markers were placed near the entry point. Agents photographed the recovered shotgun and gas can. The suspect's vehicle was examined on-site before being towed for further forensic analysis. Investigators began pulling surveillance footage from the property and surrounding streets. Nearby residents were asked to review doorbell and security cameras to help determine how long Martin had been in the area before entering the gate. Palm Beach County deputies assisted federal agents as they canvassed the neighborhood and established a tighter perimeter around the estate. Officials emphasized that the response was rapid, that agents detected the intruder quickly and moved in before he could advance deeper onto the property. Still, questions immediately surfaced about timing. Martin appeared to have entered as another vehicle was leaving, exploiting a brief opening at the gate. That detail has become central to the ongoing security review, as investigators examine whether procedures need to change during overnight hours. Even though Trump wasn't there, the breach triggered a broader reassessment of perimeter controls and response protocols. Additional patrols were visible around Palm Beach within hours, and coordination between federal and local agencies has become more intense. Donald Trump has not publicly addressed the Mar-a-Lago incident. Instead, hours after the Secret Service released its first statement, he took to Truth Social to celebrate sports, congratulating the U.S. ice hockey team for winning gold at the Winter Olympics. The investigators are also focusing on the weapon itself and the security gap that made this possible. Once investigators confirmed Trump was safe, their focus narrowed in on two things: how Austin Tucker Martin got inside and what he was carrying when he did. Secret Service agents spotted him almost immediately after he crossed inside. What caught their attention right away was what he had in his hands. Martin was carrying a shotgun. Along with it, he had a gasoline container. Both items were recovered at the scene and photographed as evidence. Investigators later searched Martin's vehicle and found the original box for the shotgun. That discovery became a key piece of the case because it suggests the firearm may have been recently purchased or transported in its packaging. Federal agents are now tracing the serial number to determine exactly where and when the weapon was obtained. They're also reviewing any recent transactions tied to Martin to see if the purchase lines up with his trip from North Carolina to Florida. The gas can raise even more concern. Officials haven't publicly speculated on Martin's intended use for it, but investigators are treating it as a potential incendiary device, especially given the location and timing. An armed individual carrying both a firearm and fuel inside a high-security property immediately triggers worst-case scenario protocols. Security teams are also digging into Martin's movements before he reached the gate. Traffic cameras, license plate readers, toll records, and nearby residential security footage are all being reviewed to figure out when he arrived in Palm Beach and how long he may have been in the area. Another critical question is whether Martin conducted any reconnaissance beforehand. Did he scope out the entrance? Did he wait for the right moment? Or did he arrive and act impulsively? Right now, investigators don't have definitive answers, but what they do know is that Martin managed to exploit a brief window during vehicle movement, something the Secret Service is now reviewing internally. This incident immediately drew comparisons to earlier threats. This didn't come out of nowhere. Back in 2024, during a campaign rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, Trump came within inches of being killed. A gunman opened fire from outside the secured area. One of the bullets grazed Trump's ear. You could see blood running down the side of his face as Secret Service agents rushed the stage and pulled him to safety. That moment went viral almost instantly. Trump standing back up, raising his fist while agents surrounded him. The shooter was taken out moments later. Investigators eventually confirmed the gunman had positioned himself at an elevated spot, exploiting gaps in rooftop coverage. That incident forced a massive rethink of rally security. Then there was the the Florida golf course incident later that year, a Secret Service agent spotted a rifle barrel sticking out of bushes near Trump's location. The suspect was arrested before Trump ever came into view. There was also another serious threat that unfolded not long ago. Earlier this month, Ryan Ruth, a 59-year-old man, was sentenced to life in prison for plotting to assassinate Donald Trump during a Florida golf outing in September 2024. Prosecutors said Routh didn't act impulsively. He allegedly spent weeks tracking Trump's movements, studying public schedules, and monitoring locations where security might be thinner. Investigators found evidence showing Routh carefully planned travel routes, timed his movements around Trump's appearances, and attempted to position himself close enough to carry out the attack. Court filings revealed messages and materials that pointed to clear premeditation, including communications expressing violent intent and steps taken to prepare for the encounter. Authorities intervened before Ruth could execute the plan, stopping what prosecutors described as a deliberate attempt to exploit a routine, low-key setting. In both situations, the focus wasn't on public rallies or major events. It was in Trump's everyday environments, a golf course, then his private residence. Spaces normally associated with downtime became targets. Earlier this year in Georgia, another man carrying a shotgun was detained outside the U.S. Capitol after running toward the building. Trump wasn't there, but it added to a growing sense that something bigger is going on. In September 2025, Charlie Kirk was fatally shot during a public speaking engagement in Utah. Kirk, widely known as the founder of Turning Point USA and a prominent conservative organizer, had spent years building a national profile through campus appearances, media commentary, and online outreach. His events frequently attracted both large crowds and organized protests. His death, caught on camera, sent shockwaves through conservative circles and intensified concerns about rising political violence in the United States. And that's why Mar-a-Lago hits differently. This wasn't a rally. This wasn't a public building. This was Trump's home. Yes, it's heavily protected, but it's still a private residence. And someone managed to walk inside the perimeter, carrying a shotgun and gas. Federal investigators are now looking at these incidents together, not just one at a time. They're reviewing travel patterns, online activity, behavioral warning signs. No official links yet, but they're treating this as part of a wider threat picture. Behind the scenes, security has already tightened. For now, officials said their focus is on completing a thorough forensic reconstruction and ensuring there were no additional risks to public safety. Within hours of the incident, reactions started pouring in from across the political spectrum. Some officials focused on praising the rapid response by the Secret Service. Others immediately raised concerns about rising political violence and the broader tone of public discourse. White House representatives said federal law enforcement acted quickly and decisively, emphasizing that an armed intruder had been neutralized before anyone else was harmed. At the same time, aides close to Donald Trump said he had been briefed and was closely following developments. But it didn't stop there. Several people are noticing the growing number of threats involving Trump over the past year, arguing that heated political rhetoric from both sides is creating an environment where unstable individuals feel emboldened to act. The FBI reiterated that motive remains under investigation and warned against speculation while evidence is still being gathered. They stressed that their focus is on facts, travel history, digital records, family interviews, not political narratives. Supporters of Trump framed the incident as yet another example of escalating threats against him. In Martin's private messages, he brought up Jeffrey Epstein and what he believed was a massive government cover-up, telling co-workers that evil is real and encouraging them to spread the word. That kind of frustration isn't rare right now. For a lot of people, the Epstein case has become a symbol of everything they think is broken: powerful people walking free, questions going unanswered, and institutions that feel untouchable. Most people vent online and move on, but some don't. When someone already feels isolated or overwhelmed, that anger can turn into a twisted sense of mission. Social media and conspiracy spaces only amplify it, feeding the idea that dramatic action is the only way to be heard. Placed next to what happened at Mar-a-Lago, it's hard not to wonder whether this growing outrage over Epstein and similar scandals is helping push certain people past the breaking point. What everyone seems to agree on is that the amount of high-risk incidents involving political figures is no longer rare. Today's threat landscape looks very different from even a decade ago. It's less about coordinated groups and more about individuals acting alone, traveling long distances, and making sudden decisions that turn deadly in seconds. All you need is a gun and a motive. What do you think was Martin's motive? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section. And before you leave, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Criminal Corner so you don't miss the next ones.